Morning, Honorable Speaker.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning,
Members, yes, I suggest that we start with our meeting.
Good morning to everybody.
Morning.
Good morning, Mama Nyamani.
Morning, Honorable Speaker.
Morning, everybody.
morning.
We are now forming quorum, members. Can we start with our meeting? We shall now have the opportunity for silent prayers and meditation. Thanks very much. Let's proceed. Are there any motion without notice in terms of House Rule 145? Are there any notice of motions in terms of House Rule 146? Are there any statements by members? Rule 200? Are there any executive statements?
Minus hand is up.
Honorable Smiley, your hands is up.
Yeah, Chairperson. Speaker, thank you, Honorable Speaker. I do have got a member statement, but I'm not so sure. I was trying to get your attention when I was raising my hand. I don't know if I can read it or not.
Yes. You can proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. This week we have seen and heard the suspension of grade 10 and 3 learners from our various schools across Limpopo province, and this negatively impacts on the derogable right of these learners to be able to be taught and receive education. The Department of Education is in a desperate need for financial infrastructure, financial assistance, and to adhere to the minimum norms and standards set by the Department of Health in regards to social distancing and PPEs. In order for the department to adhere and comply fully, to nearly comply, 30,000 classrooms is needed to adhere to these regulations across Limpopo province. Taking into account the department and government's limited resources, will the department consider, and that's the Department of Education, IT technology or long-distance learning and or increased efforts to improve schools' access to data and IT equipment, knowing that the COVID epidemic will be with us at least for the next year and a half? I put it forward. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honourable Smiley. Can I check if there is any member from the executive who want to respond from the member statement? No one? Okay, can we proceed to item 6? Are there any tabling of committee reports, other reports and papers? If none, let's move to orders of the day. 7.1, First reading of the Limpopo Special COVID-19 Adjustment Bill 2020 B03/2020 MEC for Provincial Treasury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, our brand new Speaker of the Provincial Legislature, Mayor Rosemary Mulapo, the Deputy Speaker of the Legislature, Ntate Jerindo, Honorable Premier of our province, Ntate Fupumatabata, honorable members of the Executive Council, my colleagues, honorable members of the Provincial Legislature, leaders of the opposition parties, esteemed leaders of the House, Director General of the province and heads of departments present, ladies and gentlemen. Madam Speaker, since the declaration of the state of disaster as a result of an outbreak in our country of the COVID-19, commonly known as coronavirus, the Honorable State President announced that government will make available social and economic support, commonly referred to as stimulus package, of around 500 billion rands. It was further decided that 130 billion rands towards the 500 billion will come from national and provincial 2021 budgets. That 30 billion of the 130 billion will be sourced from the already tabled provincial budgets. Limpopo's contribution to the 30 billion is 3.5 billion rands. Our Premier, reality is that COVID-19 has inevitably increased poverty in the province due to the current economic growth restraint, the increase in unemployment and loss of income from both formal and informal business activities. The province is likely to see an increase in demand for government social services, resulting in an increased fiscal burden of the province coffers. Madam Speaker, the country is faced with a technical recession with negative GDP growth rates during the last 3 quarters. In the same period, the unemployment rate in Limpopo increased exponentially to 23.6% and is expected to worsen due to the impact of COVID-19. Sectors that will be most affected are mining, manufacturing, construction, transport, wholesale, retail, motor trade, catering, and accommodation. This special adjustment therefore seeks to modify the 2021 budget to utilize current baseline allocations to provide for the rapidly changing economic conditions and enable spending in response to COVID-19 and amend any changes in the conditional grant allocations. All other adjustments which are not included in the special adjustment budget will be tabled in the normal adjustment budget processes. In adjusting the 2021 provincial budget, the provincial treasury remained alive to the realities and immediate challenges facing the people of our province. And it is of utmost importance that all of us adhere to the COVID-19 regulations in order to break the cycle of infections in the province and in the country. Madam Speaker, in order to accumulate the province 3.5 billion contributions, all departments and public entities were requested to revisit their equitable share allocations to identify programs or activities that could temporarily be suspended without negatively impacting the longevity of such programs. These were typical programs or activities that had already been put on hold during the lockdown period. Projects where implementation dates could be moved out to the next financial year, or projects and spending activities that were not critical to the core service delivery requirements of the departments. These reductions were approved by the Executive Council. On Premier, I'm pleased to announce that National Treasury has decided that provinces will retain their equitable share contributions in their respective provinces, which means that there will be no change to equitable share allocation and that it will remain at 62.3 billion. but the province must therefore reprioritize the said contribution to fund COVID-19 projects. In order to collate the required 3.5 billion, the following cuts were made to the equitable share budgets of the departments and their public entities. And the cuts are as follows. The Office of the Premier, 56.5 million. Legislature, 21 million. Department of Education, 417.9 million. Agriculture and Rural Development, 299.4 million. Provincial Treasury, 80 million. Economic Development, Environment and Tourism, 420 million. Department of Health, 1 billion. Transport and Community Safety, 154 million. Public Works, Roads and Infrastructure, 649 million. Sports, Arts and Culture, 58 million. Cooperative Governance, Human Settlements and Traditional Affairs, 114 million. And Social Development, 195 million. And the entire cut would equal to 3.5 billion. These funds are reallocated to departments and public entities to address COVID-19 projects as follows. Office of the Premier is allocated 6 million to supplement the province COVID-19 communication strategy. Department of Education is allocated 397.6 million to address COVID-19 return to school related projects. Health is allocated 1.8 billion to prepare for the provincial health COVID-19 surge response. Transport and Community Safety is allocated 12.2 million to be transferred to Gateway Airport Authority Limited to prepare the airport to accept air travelers. Public Works, Roads and Infrastructure is allocated 36.6 million to respond on preparing provincial quarantine and related sites. Sports, Arts and Culture is allocated 3.6 million to provide relief for Limpopo-based artists. Social Development is allocated 10.4 million to address social work services and provincial care centers. Madam Speaker, an amount of 500 million is also made available for provincial socio-economic recovery projects as follows. The Department of Public Works, Roads and Infrastructure is reallocated the amount of 400 million as a transfer payment to Road Agency Limpopo to address roads infrastructure commitments. Department of Agriculture and Rural Development is allocated 57.5 million to support Limpopo farmers with production inputs, which will be allocated to accommodate farmers who scored 4 on the national scorecard and did not benefit from national support package. Department of Economic Development, Environment and Tourism is allocated 42.5 million for the following projects. 10 million to support Limpopo SMMEs and cooperatives through its public entity, Limpopo Economic Development Agency. 10 million to support Limpopo SMME and cooperative finance through the National Empowerment Fund. 10 million rands to support Limpopo tourism entities that did not benefit from the National Tourism Relief Package. 7.8 million to support waste management collectors and operators in the province. 4.7 million to independently review the special economic zone environmental impact studies. An amount of 686 million has been reserved to fund a shortfall due to as COVID-19 surge in the province. Madam Speaker, the province has received amendments to the conditional grants allocations. In this regard, the provincial allocation on conditional grants is adjusted downwards by 543 million from 9.8 billion to 9.3 billion. The departments affected include the Department of Education. Conditional grant allocations are reduced by 295.8 million. That will include the Education Infrastructure Grant, which is reduced by 280 million, and the Maths and Science Technology Grant, which is reduced by 8.7 million, and HIV and AIDS Life Skills Grant, which is reduced by 6.8 million. The Department of Agriculture conditional grants are reduced by 76.6 7 million, which will be related to the Comprehensive Agricultural Support Program grant, which is reduced by 59 million, and the Lechima grant, which is reduced by 17.7 million. The Department of Public Works, Roads and Infrastructure's Provincial Road Maintenance grant is reduced by 196.1 million. And the Department of Corporate Governance, Human Settlement and Traditional Affairs, COGSTA, conditional grants are reduced by 137 million. That would relate to the Human Settlement grant, which is reduced by 112.5 million, and the Title Deed Restoration grant, which is reduced by 24.7 million. The Department of Health is allocated an additional 223.4 million as a new component known as COVID-19 within the Comprehensive HIV and AIDS grant. In the initial stages of the declared national disaster, Provincial Department of Health also received 42.4 million from the Provincial Disaster Grant. National Treasury approved the utilization of these funds from March 2020 to October 2020 in terms of DORA, which is tabled herewith. The Provincial Treasury therefore recommends that departments allocate 20% of their relevant conditional grant allocations to fund COVID-19 responses using the revised frameworks, which will avail an amount of 1.873 billion to the province. Based on the above cuts and reprioritization, all provincial government departments will be required to revise their conditional grant business plans to accommodate the COVID-19 response package in line with the revised grant frameworks. All provincial departments will also be required to revise and amend their annual performance plans to take into account all amendments to their approved budget. Finally, due to all adjustments outlined above, the provincial budget will therefore decrease from 72.796 billion to 71.6 billion. Our Premier, we are aware that the plans and wishes of the Provincial Command Council, as presented by various provincial departments and entities, would require more resources to fund various socio-economic programs in response to COVID-19. But the reality is that the pandemic found the country and the province already reeling from serious economic meltdown. Hence, adjustments were done in line with President Cyril Ramaphosa's emphasis on the importance of balancing the current health challenges and ensuring the recovery of the economy. Our Premier, we must report to you that COVID-19 has had serious ramifications on the compensation of employees. In this regard, the departments have been requested to submit only critical posts to Provincial Treasury for consideration. The original budget for COE in the province was 50.8 billion, and this was reduced by 1 billion to contribute to funding COVID-19's 3.5 billion. The costing of normal COE expenditure amounts to 47.2 billion, and liabilities such as pay progression, performance bonus, and cost of living adjustments amounts to 3.1 billion. This leaves the province with a deficit of 685 million before implementing the 2020 revised recruitment plans. Due to this movement and adjustment of funds, most departments will not be able to fill posts in terms of their 2020 revised recruitment plans amounting to 792 million, which will result to a provincial compensation of employees deficit of 1.1 billion. As far as public entities are concerned, their original budget for COE was 598 million, and this was reduced by 40.2 million to contribute to funding COVID-19 related activities. Their costing of normal compensation of employees expenditure amounts to 732 million, and liabilities such as pay progression, performance of bonuses, and cost of living amounts to 56.9 million. This leaves the public entities with 65.7 million before implementing the 2020 revised recruitment plans. The changes made on this provincial special adjustment budget is undeniably our attempt to construct an edifice of recovery from the people, for the people of Limpopo under these difficult conditions, and that work must most certainly continue without let or hindrance. Without a vision to guide our path and without commitment that knows no limits, we can never build a bright future for generations to come. Honorable Premier, let me thank you for your continued guidance and leadership in the special budget adjustment. My colleagues in the Executive Council, and Honorable Rudolph Pala, the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Treasury, and your collective, your support is immensely appreciated. HOD Gavin Pratt and Team Provincial Treasury, the task to adjust and present the special adjustment budget was not an easy one. Continue to be the best in what you do. Thank you very much for your tireless effort. Our members, ladies and gentlemen, I therefore table herewith the 2021 Special Adjustment Appropriation Bill and the Special Provincial Budget Policy Statements. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable MEC Squat. I think the copy of the speech will be emailed to all members after sitting. So the bill, together with its supporting documents, are referred to the Portfolio Committee on Provincial Treasurer for consideration and to report back to the House. Let's move to item 8, which is the motion for the recognition of Deputy Chief Whip by the Honorable Chief Whip.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, House Rule 20, Sub-Rule 3 provides that in the absence of the Chief Whip, the Deputy Chief Whip of the majority party must act as the Chief Whip of the Legislature. I therefore, Honorable Speaker, move that this House recognizes the Honorable Mochadi SM as the Deputy Chief Whip of the Legislature. I move accordingly, Honorable Speaker, and thank you. And happy birthday to Honorable Maseko.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. Can I call for seconder?
Honorable Speaker.
Yes.
Honorable Speaker. I, Honorable Chair Salani, am hereby seconding the motion raised by the Honorable Chief Whip.
Thank you, Honorable Sedani. Let's move to item 9. Are there any announcements? If none, from the office of the Speaker, we wish to send a happy birthday to Honorable Maseko, wishing him many years to come. Enjoy your birthday, Honorable Maseko. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
This House is adjourned until further notice.
Let's rise, Honorable Speaker. Who comes in?
Honorable Speaker.
Happy birthday.